11:21 on AM 950 on this beautiful April 18th morning, at least in the Twin Cities, where if it's not beautiful where you live, move to Minneapolis for the weather. You won't be disappointed. This is AM 950, Doug Pagitt Radio, religious radio. That's not quite right, where we try to talk about all kinds of things, including religion. And this week I was in an interesting conversation with somebody. And here's what he said. He's somebody who engages in conversation with the current day atheists. These would be Dawkins and Hitchens and Sam Harris and these guys. And I actually like these guys a lot. I want to have a number of them on my show. They get a book that comes out, and I might invite them to come be on the show. I think I like it when people provide a critique to Christianity in North America, especially, because Christianity doesn't do well when it's in a position of power. Right? Christianity does much, much better when it's an alternative to oppressive systems rather than becoming a powerful system in and of itself. So it's just a better story told when it's providing freedom for people rather than trying to provide some sort of overarching power structure for people. And this conversation I was having with this fellow, he said something interesting. He said, I find these modern day atheist types to have very unimaginative critiques of Christianity. And I thought, oh, yeah, I hear a lot of Christians that are like, I don't listen to those guys. Those guys are just nothing. And he said, but I don't blame it on them. I blame it on the fact that the kind of Christianity that they have available to critique isn't very imaginative. So when you're the critiquer of a not very imaginative Christianity, well, how good is your critique going to be? All right. So he said the problem is if we want these guys to have a more robust kind of arguments, well, that's not really their responsibility. It's kind of ours. They're giving us the best that they need to, because Christianity isn't very imaginative. And that got me thinking. It got me thinking about when Christianity becomes so melded with the other versions of what it means to sort of live one's life. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with a person living a positive, hopeful life in the world. I'm not calling for everyone to adjust themselves to the same religious and spiritual path or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that everybody should collapse it all into one. But when it's not very provocative, it's not very imaginative, it has lost its critique. And sometimes I think that there's Christians who run around and they just try to find whatever other people are into and they think that's what they're supposed to critique, so that like the way Christianity lives a creative tension in the world is to just be a Debbie Downer.
The anti-everything?
Yeah, the anti-everything. So whatever you're into, well, that's a problem. So if things are going well for you, then you should know that things aren't going well for most people in the world. This kind of thing, right? And that it's always whatever you're not doing, that's the Christian thing that you should be into. And because there's kind of this strange guilt-laden sort of Christianity. And that's not what I'm getting at either. I'm not saying you should just run around and be all negative about it all. But his argument was the Christian story actually calls us to something really quite compelling. But if what we present or talk about or try to recruit people into is something that's really just a little more successful version of what you're already doing, well, right? So if Christianity is being told in the phrases of like, look, live a life now that connects you with God so that when you die, you get to go to heaven later. And that becomes the framework of it all, right? And someone wants to come and critique that, the critique isn't going to be very interesting, right? Because that's kind of a not very compelling, and I don't think very accurate to what the Christian story and the Bible story is about anyway. But that's not very compelling. If, on the other hand, and this is what a lot of the Christian folks who talk back to the atheist critique want to say is, well, if you really knew what was going on in Christianity, you'd find that it's really quite thoughtful and quite provocative and is doing some really intense thing, is rethinking about power and social structures, and is really working from the bottom up, and is also working from the top down, is working from the edges in, is working from the middle out. Like, if you really knew what was going on in Christianity, your critique would certainly be a whole lot better. And these guys are like, well, I don't know. I look around at it most everywhere, and I don't see that stuff.
Right. It is?
Yeah. Okay. News to me. Right. So whose responsibility is it? And this guy says, it's the responsibility of those of us who are the practitioners of it, those of us who are the articulators of it, those of us who live it out ourselves, that we should be engaged in something that's far more intriguing. So one of the things that I want to do on the show, and you're going to hear in the last segment here of the show, is that we're going to talk with somebody who's advocating the Art of Living Foundation. This is a fellow's coming in town, and he's going to be speaking, and the Art of Living Foundation is putting on this Eastern mystical spiritual leader who's coming in town, His Holiness Shari Shari, and he's coming in, and he's going to be, and we're going to talk to the person who's coordinating in the area, and they're going to say, hey, you folks should come on out. Oh. Because I think that part of what makes Christianity interesting in the pluralistic world that we live in is that it should be the host and the engager to the one who chooses to engage with any other opinion in the world, right? Like that's one of the things that I think is embedded within Christianity. Because as Christians, we don't hold to Gnostic truth or secret truth or private little truths that only a certain group of people can get to by following a set of practices. We want to hold to everything that's true, right? Anything that's good, anything that's right, anything that's beautiful. This becomes the call for Christians, that wherever God is up and active and alive and well and working, that's the stuff we should be into. So our role, it seems to me, then ought to be that we're the host of whatever conversations we need to host so that we can find those ways.
Rather than ignore, deny, condemn.
Right, rather than circling it up and saying, well, we have something unique that those folks don't have. And even people who want to take a unique view of Christianity, which I don't have a problem with. If somebody's like, I think Christianity says some things and Jesus does some things and he advocates in ways that nobody else does. There's something really unique about Christianity. Well, then that should be the very basis for hosting every other conversation with people who think differently about it.
Right.
Like if you really have something that you're like, this is flat out special. Well, then to my mind, that should compel you into all of these other conversations. And that would be far more interesting rather than being a group of people who speak as if you do our thing. So I was with somebody this week who also said she went to a church. It's a church that she actually knew quite well. And the person who introduced communion, which is the act of taking this bread and this wine and drinking it and eating it, and they made a really big deal out of it, basically in her view, by saying, if you want to eat our bread and you want to drink our juice, you need to believe the way we do. So why don't you go ahead and believe the way we do, and then you can come up and drink our juice and eat our bread. Right. And she's like, that bread's not all that compelling. Like how you put this into some kind of an exclusive activity that I would actually want, as opposed to, in her view, saying, if you want to be part of this really big conversation, come on in and make it. Come on in and join in. Yeah. And it seems that we'd have a much more interesting kind of Christianity in our world if Christianity saw itself as the host in our society whenever possible for other perspectives, for other views, and for other ideas. Yeah,
not bad.
That's what I think. That's how I view the world. We're going to be back here with natural health coach Shelley Pagitt, who will tell you the way it is when it comes to natural health. And there's going to be none of that, none of this sort of religious openness, funny business with her. She's going to lay down the law. We're going to hear it all. Natural health coach Shelley Pagitt on AM 950 after the break, and over at DougPadgettRadio.com if you want to see her lovely face.
I got God on my side, and I'm just trying to survive.